So our speaker today is Becky Halbe, who is retired from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service after a 30-plus year career, mostly working in the National Wildlife Refuge System. A priority in retirement for Becky was the Master Gardener training, and she graduated with the class of 2015. She was already an active volunteer with the Plot Against Hunger vegetable gardening program. And as a Master Gardener, she continued in this work, plus other public education classes, public events, and the Plant Nova Natives campaign, and others. During the pandemic, Becky coordinated a garden produce bagging program that delivered more than 15,000 pounds of packaged produce to local food pantries over the past 2 years. She also participated in a gleaning program that delivered close to 40,000 pounds of fresh fruit and vegetables to food pantries in 2021. Apart from being an Extension Master Gardener, she is also an active Master Naturalist. So without any further ado, I will now turn it over to you, Becky, to start your presentation.
Thank you, Julie. So as an overview to the presentation, today I'm going to cover why do you want to convert your lawn to garden? Actually, that's a question you need to ask yourself. What type of garden do you want? Considerations for selecting the right spot and working with what you have. Materials that you'll need. Advantages and limitations of lasagna gardening, and I'll explain that term. Conversion options, cues of care, monitoring, and resources. Before I go any further, I just want to assure everybody or make this clear. I'm speaking to you from Arlington, Virginia, and a lot of what I'm covering today is applicable anywhere, but some of what I talk about, some of the specific plants or things like that may be more suited to my area. So just bear that in mind. A good friend of mine worked at USA Today, and she said, "Don't bury the lead." I haven't really explained what this talk is about. It's lasagna gardening, which is a phrase coined by Patricia Lanza. And by the way, lead is the way you spell it. L-E-D-E is the way you spell that when you talk about bury the lead. So lasagna gardening is a phrase coined by Patricia Lanza in several books. It's also called sheet mulching. And that was my gateway into this back-saving way of converting turf to garden. Very basically, it's covering the grass with 6 layers. That seems to be the magic number, is 6 layers of wet newspaper or 1 layer of wet cardboard. You do need to wet it. Then you just start building your garden bed, your lasagna layers with various materials. And you want to work from the coarser materials, the heavier materials, to the finer ones. At the end, your bed should be anywhere from 4 to 6 inches, maybe a little shorter, maybe a little taller. You don't need to go out with a ruler and make sure that it's, you don't need to get that exact. This technique is applicable for lawns. You can use it to fill a raised bed, and you can use it to fill containers. The nice thing about lasagna gardening is you can plant directly into the created beds. You don't need to wait. You don't need to wait till everything underneath breaks down. That's great if it does, and it will over time. But if you're impatient like me, once I build that bed, I want to start planting right in it, and it works. I'll also touch on other conversion methods. Here's a before, during, and after. You can see it's not the same property. I had 3 pictures of different stages, and I thought I'd use them all. This one on the left, that's taken this winter. So the grass there, there is grass there, it's just dead. But to me, this is a perfect opportunity for building a garden out of lasagna gardening method, because why would you want to drag your mower out of the fence or down the driveway to mow those 2 tiny strips when you could do lasagna gardening, build a bed and have peas growing up that chain link fence? Or maybe you want to have coral honeysuckle or some other native vine growing along that chain link fence, make it prettier. You could put flowers or golden ragwort or some other low ground cover along the street, this little piece along the street there. And this is kind of this is at my church. Years ago, we wanted to get rid of this Nandina and plant a native garden. And Nandina is called heavenly bamboo. It's anything but. It's a terrible invasive. It has berries that can actually harm and kill some of our native birds like cedar waxwings. So it's really not a good idea to have Nandina on your property. I know it's very popular, but it's not good for wildlife. We wanted to get rid of it. And the unfortunate thing about Nandina, it's got a really tenacious root system. This man here, he has a mattock in his hand. That's a pretty powerful tool. We ended up, and I'll give a plug to the Shirlington Employment and Education Center, SEEK, here in Arlington. We hired 2 day laborers to come in, and in 4 hours, they had taken care of that Nandina. So this would be a real challenge for lasagna gardening, because Nandina, it would break right through cardboard or newspaper. There are some limitations to lasagna gardening, and we'll talk about that too. And here on the right is my property. And this was years ago when I first started converting my yard to garden. You can see I have a slope here on my lawn, and then it flattens out. So this is where I started. This was the first lasagna gardening. And then I moved over to what I call the hell strip. It's not my term, but I like it. And I started planting down here, and then I'm just building my way down. You can see I've also put in pavers for people that park their car and want to get onto the sidewalk. Before you do anything, stop and ask yourself, why are you doing this? It's best to have some plan in place before you jump into something like this. So here are some questions. Why are you doing this? Are you tired of mowing? Do you want to save money, time, and energy? Is your grass not thriving? Do you want to lessen noise pollution? Does your lawn get the best sunlight, but you'd rather have vegetables growing there? Do you want to support nature by growing native plants? All of these are good questions, because lawns, our turf grass lawns that most of us have, they are throwbacks to our European aristocracy and even our colonial roots. And it took a lot of money for people back then to have lawns. They had to be able to afford people to take care of it. Oftentimes it was slave labor that did that. And it's still expensive to take care of a lawn. If you want that pristine monochrome lawn that so many people aim for, it takes chemicals, it takes fertilizers, it takes mowing, it takes weeding, it takes a lot of care. And it's not adding anything to our environment. Grass lawns don't benefit creatures. They don't benefit caterpillars and birds and wildlife. And I know that many of us I live in a suburb. Most of my neighbors have lawns. I still have a grass lawn for the most part. Don't be afraid to be different. You might be the first one to convert your yard, but you probably won't be the last. And think about what type of garden you want. Do you want a vegetable garden, even in your front yard? Do you want native plants, flowers, something else? Or what I like is a combination. So I always have fruit and vegetables in my yard. These all 3 are my yards. This is a gooseberry bush that I've had for years, and right in front of it, at the top of my hill in the front yard, I built a little vegetable bed with lasagna gardening. This is a fairly flat area, and that's why it was easy to convert. I still haven't tackled that slope, but I'm going to. And this is down in my hell strip. This is a high bush blueberry, and I'm telling you what, this is the best producing blueberry I've ever had. And it's right down there along the street. That's probably why the birds aren't getting the fruit before I do. And then in my backyard, I have a garden up against my neighbor's garage. It's just a strange thing in my neighborhood that our property lines actually go right up to the garage of the next person. Another shot of my yard, just showing some native plants that I have. This is a phlox, this is a baptisia, this is yet to be planted. And this is when I first planted it. I put in quite a few little annuals. I put in some herbs. This is another Baptisia. And you can see it's already changed in this photograph. I've now got more perennial natives growing here, and this part is still to be planted. There are a lot of site considerations you want to take into account. How many hours of sunlight does that area get? Before you plant a vegetable garden, you need to know how many hours of sunlight that area is getting. Vegetables need at least 6 hours of good sun. And what type of garden? Do you want to do it in bed, in ground? Do you want to do a raised bed or a container? A good friend of mine who gardens at First Presbyterian and raises vegetables to give to local food banks, she had raised beds that she needed to fill. It's expensive to go out and buy enough bagged material, compost and composted manure and topsoil, garden soil, that kind of thing. It's very expensive to buy enough bags of that to fill a standard raised bed, 4 by 8 feet or whatever you've got. So lasagna gardening can save you a lot of money. You're putting in the layers of the cardboard or the newspaper layers, and then starting to fill it. You can use wood chips for that bottom coarse layer. You can use straw, not hay. You can use leaves and then start building up to the finer layers. And you save a lot of money. Maybe at the top, you still go and buy some composted manure to work in or something like that. But the more you can do with those base layers, it can save you a lot of money. Your garden plants, usually a lot of them don't use much more than that much soil anyway. Now, tomatoes and other things are going to go deeper, but just bear in mind, why are you spending all that money for good quality soil at the bottom where some of the roots are never going to get? Same thing for containers. You can do a lasagna gardening on a smaller scale right into your planting containers. If you have a balcony, or I always have a mix. I have containers in my yard as well. Bear in mind the topography. I've talked about the slope. If you use lasagna gardening on a slope, you might have the materials wash away. Same thing, you've probably seen that when you mulch. If you get a good gully washer, a lot of that mulch is going to wash down, especially if there's a slope. So bear in mind what topography you're working with. And then the environs. Are there street salts that are going to get washed in there? Do dogs walk by? Do you have deer in your neighborhood? They're all going to find your garden. And soil test. I want to bring this up because as master gardeners, we are always promoting soil tests, and they are a great idea. In Virginia, this is what our soil test box looks like. You fill it with soil, you put that in the mail, send it to Virginia Tech, and they email you back your results. Well, I'm going to take a step back from my training and say, I don't really think it's necessary to do a soil test before you build that bed, because you're just going to be covering that turf with new materials. So unless you suspect that you've got lead or some heavy metal problems in that soil, I don't think a soil test is necessary. And if you do suspect heavy metals, this type of soil test is not going to get you those results. You're going to have to spend some money and work with some laboratories to get that kind of specialty test done. I did a little research, and here in Virginia, we've got a company called Waypoint Analytical in Richmond, Virginia, and you might be able to get that done through them if you suspect heavy metals. But if not, the soil test can be done maybe the next year. Do your lasagna gardening, let things get settled, and then test the soil to see how you've done. So here are the materials, little fun graphic. You've got your newspaper, 6 layers or 1 layer of cardboard. This is a great way to use up those Amazon boxes that so many of us have had coming to our doors during this pandemic. Then you move to the coarser materials. This is straw. Straw tends to have less weed seeds in it than hay, so make sure you're using straw. How can you tell? Straw is hollow, like a drinking straw. And then you work your way up to these finer materials on top. So we'll go a little bit more in detail. Newspaper or cardboard, 6 layers of newspaper, 1 layer of cardboard. Make sure the stickers, staples, and tape are removed. As far as newspaper, we used to say try to use the non-colored sections, but newspapers are not using harmful inks anymore, so it's fine to use the colored supplement, not the shiny supplements, but it's fine to use the normal newspaper. Then you move to the coarse materials: straw, not hay, wood chips. You can get arborist wood chips. If you know people that have had a tree cut down recently and the wood chips are available, you can take those. Or here in Arlington County, we have free wood chips available through the county. You can haul them off yourself or have them delivered for a price. And then you move to the finer materials, your own grass clippings. I would suggest you only use your own grass clippings because you know what you've put into them. And if you use fertilizers or herbicides, then don't use your grass clippings, because herbicides are going to kill whatever you're trying to plant. You can use shredded paper. A lot of us have our own paper shredders at home, and you can use that paper for your lasagna gardening layer. You can also throw it into your compost. You can use regular leaves, coarse compost, something that's pulled right out of your own compost bin. And then the finest layers for the top, shredded leaf mulch. Again, that's available for free here in Arlington County, unless you have it delivered and you pay a price. You can use sifted compost, which is just the coarse compost run through a little wire mesh so that it's finer. You can use composted manure if you have that available, or if you want to buy some. Coffee grounds. Starbucks gives away pretty good sized bags of coffee grounds, and they're great for your garden, for your compost, for lasagna gardening. You can also use some soil. I do a lot of seed starting, and all those little pots of soil, I can't stand to just throw them out. So I'll put them into a container and use them for lasagna gardening, use them in my compost. I'm trying to get to a point where I don't have to buy a lot of materials at the garden stores. And if you're doing this on a lawn, again, aim for 4 to 6 layers total height. They will start to settle as the grass beneath breaks down. Another shot of my yard, you can see this hill that I need to tackle. It's to the point, I used to wear my soccer cleats to mow this because it's so steep. I don't want to slip. And again, just a little tighter shot. I've got some globe basil growing here. I have some little annuals. This is a pepper. And then over time, I started putting in more natives. This is one thing I will warn you against. This is herb fennel. And I got this from a friend and I wanted it. I put it in there intentionally. Herb fennel is one of the host plants for the black swallowtail butterfly caterpillars. And I wanted to encourage caterpillars and raise butterflies. Unfortunately, fennel is also allelopathic, which means it starts to inhibit other plants from growing around it. So it's a big bully, and it starts to just muscle its way into your garden, and pretty soon you've got fennel everywhere. And that's what I'm still dealing with. You can see down here along where the retaining wall meets the sidewalk, here it's pristine, right? There's nothing growing there. But now I've got little fennel plants growing all the way around along my sidewalk. And they're kind of cute when they're like 4 inches tall, and they're soft, so there's not anything prickly that's going to hurt anybody walking by. But they get really tall. They can get 3 to 4 feet tall. So I'm constantly pulling and yanking and hacking away at those. And I do want to get rid of them. I'm continuing to get rid of them every year. So you can see even bed that you've built is going to change over time. Some of the advantages of lasagna gardening: it's much easier on your back and wallet. I used to turn my turf with a garden fork, and that's also not that great because digging deep and flipping the soil, we used to think, oh, that's getting everything good and mixed up and you're putting the sod underneath and it's going to break down. Well, that's true, but you're also disturbing the soil structure. in recent years, they've been learning more and more about soil structure and how all these little microorganisms and things are living in harmony. And then you go and just turn everything topsy-turvy. So digging it up is not always the best. Plus, it's hard on your back. And if you do want to rent materials like, or machines like rototillers or turf cutters, those can be expensive, even if you just rent them. Another thing about lasagna gardening, you can work at your own pace. You can start out with a smaller area, like you saw that little garden bed I had at the top of my hill in the front yard. I can start expanding that. So do some now and then build onto it. A really good advantage is you can plant seeds or plants directly into the created beds, even the same day. I will warn you though, if you're planting deep, if you're planting something like this, like in a gallon pot, like that high bush blueberry, make sure that you call Miss Utility. Here in Virginia, it's now 811, and they will come out pretty quickly and mark where your utility lines are, because you don't want to dig into a gas line or water line or anything like that. And if you do look at Patricia Lanza's book, she's always saying, don't break the newspaper or cardboard layer. Well, you can. I do it all the time, and it's not the end of the world. You might get she's saying it's an easier way for the weeds and the grass to grow back up through that hole, but you've put a big plant in there with its own soil. I haven't had that issue. Another thing, you can start lasagna gardening at any time, as long as there's no snow on the ground. That might inhibit it, but if the ground's frozen but there's no snow, you can build your layers right now. And another good thing is, as those layers are breaking down, they're creating a nutrient-rich soil. Whereas if you get a turf cutter, you're taking away all that sod that would break down to make a nutritious soil. Excuse me. There are limitations. I showed you that slide with the gentleman and his mattock and the Nandina roots. If you have English ivy on the ground, or Nandina that you've dug up and now you have those roots, things like that, they're very tenacious. Even Bermuda grass can be hard to deal with lasagna gardening. I do have Bermuda grass and wiregrass in my yard, and this, you can keep it at bay. Lasagna gardening, you're still going to need to keep up with it. Just because you're not mowing it doesn't mean you don't pay attention to it. You're going to get weeds blowing in. You're going to get other plants blowing in. You're going to get trash blowing in, especially on a street like mine, where I've got 2 schools behind me and lots of kids walking up and down and dropping their trash. Also, as I mentioned, on a slope, or if it's really rainy, some materials may wash away. Easily remedied. You can always add more, but just watch the weather to make sure you're not doing this right before a gully washer comes in. This is a good place to stop if we've got any questions.
Yes, we certainly do have questions. You answered part of one, but someone asked if you could use lasagna method on, for instance, daylilies to smother them out.
I would dig them up. I think you'd need to dig them up. I don't have any daylilies. I have iris, and boy, my iris are hard to get rid of. So I think you'd still need to dig them up.
Okie doke. There were quite a few questions about erosion of your lasagna method onto hardscape, or vice versa, grass coming into the bed. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure, it will happen. And I'll even tell you, I'm the victim, or not the victim, I'm the cause of a lasagna gardening fail. I built that little vegetable garden on the top of my hill. I've done it twice now because I did have grass come in. I decided for one Halloween that I wanted to dig some holes and have some graves, and I had these tombstones, these little styrofoam tombstones. And I thought, oh, this will be really cool for Halloween. I put a little fence around it, had my own little graveyard, had a ghost out there. Well, then after Halloween, the cold weather came in and I never got around to putting that soil back in those holes. So what happened? I had this horrible topsy-turvy turf and holes and everything. And then the grass started growing in. Yeah, it doesn't take long for nature to undo what you've done. So that's the thing, is you do need to monitor it. And as far as the materials washing down, that's why you want to keep it like 4 to 6 inches. If you do much more, it is going to spill over. And I've just taken a sharp nose or a square nose shovel and gone along and scooped that back into my bed. Just the same thing with, same thing happens with leaves. I mean, you just have to deal with what's happening. If you do, especially if you do something along a sidewalk, you do need to monitor it.
Becky, there was a couple of questions about the hell strip, and someone said they were of the opinion that usually you should dig deeper in a hell strip before you do this so that material won't spill onto the hardscape. Do you have any comments about that?
I've only had that happen when I've just done it and there's a really heavy rain. But once you get plants in there, I've put golden ragwort and some natives, and that hell strip is now pretty much completely planted. So that will help keep the soil in place. And I haven't had that issue. I just got some arborist wood chips that I did add to the top because I've got really established plants in there now.
Okay. Would you ever use this technique under a tree?
Sure.
It wouldn't damage the tree roots or be a problem?
No, because you're building up, and then that would be a situation where you might want to not break that newspaper barrier. It also depends on the tree. Some trees, like beeches, their roots are oftentimes right at the top. And so you might do some damage to beech roots. But other trees have a pretty sturdy taproot. You kind of need to know what tree you're dealing with and the age of the tree. But if it's an established tree, I think that's a nice idea. And you could have some shade-loving ground cover or flowers or something growing up underneath that.
Okay. Am I correct in thinking that you would not till the soil under a lasagna plot?
No, you don't need to. You might want to make sure that the grass is mown, mow it one last time, get it short, and then build your bed. But no, you don't need to till it. That's the whole point, is that you're not having to put that effort into it.
And would you always pull up invasive vines before you did the lasagna technique?
Yeah, if you've got English ivy or porcelain berry or something like that, yes, you need to get those up.
Could you talk a little more about other coarse materials options? I know you mentioned straw, but are there any other coarse materials you would include?
Sure. You don't have to have any set number of layers. If you have leaves, you can just use leaves. Or if you see your neighbors putting bags of leaves out, you can grab those. There's oak leaves out in Tuckahoe Woods that I live near Tuckahoe Woods, and I mean, I've grabbed a bag of oak leaves for my own yard because I don't have many trees in my yard. So you don't have to use straw. If you've got shredded paper, you can use that. It's not an exact recipe, and that's why I like it, is you can be as flexible and kind of work with what you have. There is a point, I mean, garbage in, garbage out. If you're just using all shredded paper, no, you're not going to get it. That's not a good planting medium. You do need to think about nutrients. I should add some composted manure. Maybe you're going to have to buy a bag of something. If you don't have your own compost pile, maybe you need to buy a bag of compost, or maybe you want to use a bag of quality garden soil. But you're not going to be using as much if you're using these other materials, especially at the bottom.
Okay, thanks. Would you talk about slope options or how to how to deal with a slope?
That's what I'm working on myself. I've got a slide later on that shows how somebody handled it with a really pretty terracing project. And that's sort of what I'm looking at, but mine will probably be a little bit rougher. You can sometimes use rocks and boulders to help. It just depends on the degree of slope. Mine is to the point where I'm probably gonna hire somebody or get some ambitious friends and see what we can do. But yeah, slopes are my bugaboo right now.
Okay. So some questioner asked, with using cardboard, they thought that sometimes they're chemically treated for pests and wondered if that was a problem, and also were printed logos a problem?
Not, if you can tear it off, tear it off. If it's printed in there, it should be the better inks that aren't harmful. But I'm not aware, I tend to use newspaper, and I'm not aware that there's treated cardboard. That's something I can look into, I guess. But yeah, I don't know.
Okay, that would be great. There was another set of questions about coffee grounds and whether they might inhibit good insects and whether they might change the pH too much.
Well, again, it depends on how much you use. They could change the pH if you're using mostly coffee grounds. I know our extension agent talks about her father who used a lot of leaf mulch, and to the point that his garden was just dust. There is such thing as too much of a good thing. So that's the thing, is you want to try to balance things. So if you keep adding coffee grounds, and that's all you're putting in there, yeah, that's not going to be a good growing medium. But it is a good additive, and I use it in my compost, and I put it around some of my plants. So I like it. But again, you use it with moderation.
Lots of questions about how to discourage dogs from peeing.
What I do, because I have strawberries growing in my hill strip and blueberries and other things, I take cayenne pepper. I have a dog, so I'm not being mean to them, but dogs will usually sniff before they pee. And so I sprinkle cayenne pepper. If you go to a big box store, you can get these big things of the red pepper flakes and put those down. You can also put up I've tried putting up little fences, little terrace fences, to just keep the dogs out. And a lot of things like that. Signs can help. I mean, if I see somebody has a no poop, no pee sign in their yard, then I really try to get my dog past there before he pees, and just really encourage people to be respectful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would try the pepper.
Okay. Are walnut tree chips a problem?
Yes, because that's a good question. And somebody talked about growing under a tree, and I forgot that, yes, walnuts are also allelopathic, so they will inhibit other things from growing underneath them. So I would not use walnut chips in your raised beds.
Okay,
Gardening.
you mentioned your blueberry, you dug below the layers to anchor it. Someone asked, how deep can you actually go? And a related question was, someone's growing root vegetables in their garden. Will they have any trouble harvesting if they plant below the lasagna level?
All right, with the blueberry, how deep can you go? My house strip doesn't have hardscape. I mean, I could go pretty deep. I only went as deep as I had to for that. So I probably went 10 inches to a foot down just to get that gallon bucket worth of roots in there. And that's all the deeper I've had to go that I can think of. As far as root vegetables, I don't know, if if those root vegetables hit that cardboard or newspaper barrier, that might inhibit them. So I wouldn't do root vegetables the first year. I mean, radishes, yes, turnips, that'd be fine. But carrots and parsnips and things that want to go down deeper, daikon radishes, I would let it all break down a little more. And plus, if you know you want to plant root vegetables, you need a really loose soil. So keep that in mind when you're building those beds. Maybe add a little sand because the root vegetables really want a loose mix to be able to drill down into.
Okay. Becky, do you happen to know if Arlington County has any prohibitions planting in the Hell Strip?
Not that, no, they don't. Yes, they do. No, they don't. Yes, they do. You still need to keep it off the sidewalk. And you don't, so that's my issue with the fennel. And I have some other plants that when I planted them, they were a great size. And then they got really happy and they got bigger than I was anticipating. So I'm out there, that Baptisia I showed you on the corner, that got really happy and it's beautiful and it is soft. So when people, if they do brush by it before I get it trimmed, it's something soft that they're bumping into, not something prickly. But I still, it's on me to keep that area, the sidewalk clear. So that is one thing that they will get onto you, especially if someone reports you, then you might get a citation, not a citation, but you'll get a note from the county saying you have this amount of time to take care of that. And that's happened to three of us on this street. So
Okay.
yeah, it does happen.
Are pine needles okay material for this method? And can you use too much pine needles?
Well, again, you're looking at a total height of 4 to 6 inches. So if you're using pine needles for one of the base layers, I think that'd be great. They also can add acid, and a lot of times our soils, when they get tested, Virginia Tech, I just read a statistic that a third of the soil tests that they get are too high in lime. And so you want to build the acid, especially for vegetables. They want a little bit more acidic soil, and blueberries like acid. So I actually collected some pine fines for my blueberry bushes. So yeah, that's a great addition.
Have you ever used chicken or rabbit manure in this technique?
If you put it as a base layer, chicken manure is really hot. I mean, it can kill off seedlings and seeds because it's just very strong. So chicken manure is one of those things that you would rather have it composted first. I do have a good friend who supplies rabbit manure, and that goes into my gardens and into my compost. You can dig it into your garden. You can use it for lasagna gardening. When she delivers it, it comes with the Timothy, then that is hay. So I may get some weeds. I just told you never to use hay, but this is hay that's been chewed on and the seeds are usually pretty much gone because that's what the rabbits like. But anyway, so you get a matrix of stuff with this manure, and then you also get the manure. So rabbit manure is much more friendly for new gardens, new seedlings than chicken manure.
Okay, can this technique be used in complete shade?
Yes, it's just that whatever you plant is going to have to be shade tolerant. It's a great way to deal with a lawn. Lawns usually aren't that happy in the shade. You have to get a special shade mix. And even then, my yard, on my side yard, which gets pretty much total shade, that's the least happy grass that I have. And that is an area I want to deal with next, and maybe get some native sedges and some other more shade tolerant plants in there. So I'm not going to have to mow as much, if at all.
Great. Becky, I think you mentioned that you could put seeds in this technique right away. What about plants?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I usually do seedlings. I do more seedlings and plants than seeds, but I have done seeds and they work.
Okay. Someone else, I think this is our final question, asked about decorative rocks. Do they need to get rid of those before they do this, or what would you do about them? They were worried there was some plastic under them.
Well, yeah, it depends again on what you're going to plant on top. I would use the decorative rocks elsewhere,
Mhm.
depending on how hard it's going to be to deal with them, and take that plastic up if you can. But if you're not going to be planting anything that's going to root deep, then I mean, I just don't like. I just think we need to get rid of as much plastic in our yards as we can. But I don't know. I guess I'd have to know more about that situation. But I would not plant over rocks.
Okay. Sorry, one final thing. Someone has asked twice about planting down into clay. Do you need to be worried about a bathtub effect with water just pouring into that area?
Well, here in Virginia, especially here in Arlington, I mean, that's what our soil is pretty much is a lot of clay, and it supports a lot of plants. The advantage of this lasagna technique is that you're putting more nutrient rich soil on top of that clay, and like my blueberry out there, boy, it's happy, and it's all in the clay now. I mean, it's still, like I say, I've put some arborist chips, but all of that has broken down over time. So I haven't, no, I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Okay, great. I think we're good now. We can go on with the presentation. Thank you for answering so many questions.
Sure. Thank you for all those questions. So here are the other conversion options, some of which I've mentioned already. We've talked about lasagna gardening, which is also called sheet mulching. If you want to do your own research, you might find a lot of information on sheet mulching. Solarization is another popular way to get rid of turf grass or a really weedy area of your yard. And that's putting a big piece of plastic, heavy plastic, down on your yard and keeping it there for weeks. Now, I don't like this technique. Some people use black plastic. Some people say you can use the clear plastic. The times that I've seen clear plastic used, a lot of times what happens is you're just creating a greenhouse for those weeds, and they're just happy, and you're not killing them. They're just getting even stronger because they're protected from the elements, and then they have sunlight coming in. So if you do solarization, I think that the black plastic or the opaque plastic is a much better option. And the disadvantage is you have to really keep it there for a long time in order for it to break down that plant material underneath. And then what? You lift up the plastic and you've still got that plant material to deal with. So you're going to have to dig it off or till it or something to get rid of it. And as I've mentioned, tilling is not always the best option because you can be breaking down that soil structure. A good use of solarization happened at Central Library a few years ago. Central Library has a garden where they were growing produce and giving it to food banks. It's called Plot Against Hunger. And they ended up with some carrots that came out of the ground with all these little globules on them, these little pearls of weird little carrots. And the carrots had multiple fingers. And I mean, they were deformed and really terrible looking. And who's going to eat that? So they looked into it and they found out they had nematodes. And there are good nematodes and there are bad nematodes. And these were bad nematodes that were deforming their root crops. So they stopped, they pulled everything out, and they solarized. They put down this black plastic, heavy plastic. Think the heaviest kind of lawn, the trash bags. You can get sheets of that material and put that down. And that was in an effort to kill off those nematodes or have them go elsewhere. And it worked to a point. I don't think they're yet planting root vegetables in that area of the garden, but they are successful with planting green lettuces and things like that, they're not affected because the edible part of the plant is above the ground. It's not where the nematodes are. So the black plastic helped to an extent, but they're just going to avoid putting root vegetables in that area. They've also been fighting them with certain cover crops to help keep the nematodes at bay. And that's been somewhat successful as well. But they're just resigned that, there's a lot of things they can plant that don't have to go deep into the ground. So no root crops in that area. And that was a good use of solarization, somewhat successful. Another conversion option is turning the turf by hand, like I used to do with my garden fork. Going out there, I was, 25 years ago, I didn't mind doing that so much. But now I'd rather do this lasagna gardening. Plus, turning the turf by hand, yes, you're turning that top layer of grass underneath and maybe having that break down, but you're also, again, destroying that soil structure. You can use machinery. Some people really like to use motorized things, turf cutters and rototillers, and that's fine. It's just expensive, and those machines are heavy getting in and out of your vehicle, whether you buy one or whether you rent them. They're a lot to deal with, and they're heavy to operate as well. You may want to just have a flowering lawn. I have violets in my yard that I love. They're a native plant. They're a really beneficial nectar source for some of our first pollinators that arrive in the spring or that emerge in the spring. And I think they're lovely. So I keep the violets in my yard. I encourage the violets. I've had blue-eyed grass come into my yard. I encourage that. Oftentimes I will rescue things like blue-eyed grass. I even had cardinal flower and blue lobelia growing in my yard, and I rescued those because as I mow, those plants would probably get killed. Flowering lawn, if you want to go that way and go big time, I also have clover that I leave in my yard, and I don't use pesticides. So any of the bees, European honeybees, whatever, that come in, they're getting good nectar sources from my yard and no pesticides involved. There's another way if you really want to go big time with a flowering lawn and maybe only mow it once a month and just go all in that way. There are some seed mixes you can get. One of them, I know I'm not promoting one over the other, it's just one that I heard about and in another talk. It's called Fleur de Lawn, and it's got a mixture of grass seed as well as different types of clovers and some other flowering plants. Again, they recommend that you put that onto bare soil. So you may need to do the lasagna gardening and then put that seed down. I don't know how effective it is if you just overseed into an existing lawn. There's also sedge lawns, which is one thing I'm thinking about for my side yard that gets so much shade. Some of our native sedges, they grow in different conditions, and you want to check that. But there are some that are shade loving, and they would be a good option for a shady part of your yard. And sedges typically grow no more than 10 or 12 inches. And so that could be your new lawn, and you might only have to mow it once a season. This is an example of using heavy equipment. These areas were first gone over with a turf cutter, which is a massive, well, not massive, but it's a heavy machine. And this guy was the one that operated both the turf cutter, and it was, you could see he was really struggling to get that turf cutter in. You can see this yard is very compacted. This is at an elementary school. As Julie mentioned, I worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and this is when I was still working. I was one of the volunteers here, and these are all Fish and Wildlife volunteers. We went to this elementary school because they wanted to start a native plant garden in this area. So we came in. This is before I was a master gardener. I had no idea. I'm just a volunteer. I'm not in charge of this operation. But they used the turf cutter first And then he comes by with the rototiller. And even then you can see we're carting away all of this nutritious material that could have been benefiting the yard if it had been underneath lasagna layers. And even after the rototiller and the turf cutter, we're still digging up pieces of this yard, of this grass, because if we planted the native plants in there without taking those up, they're just going to come right back in, because there's no cardboard. We're not lasagna gardening here. All they did was add some garden soil and we planted right in, and I think they mulched it afterwards. So not a money saver and not really a time saver either. This is a term of art that I've just recently been aware of, is cues of care. So anytime you do something different, especially if it's in your front yard where other people are going to see it, you want to think about some cues of care to let people know that what you're doing here is intentional. Clean edges, a mown grass border, hardscape, like these rocks. I love rocks in a landscape. Some fencing, some signage. Let them know that these are native plants. Here you see this cardinal flower is blooming, but these aren't. And there's certain times a year where there's nothing blooming, like usually like right now. Let people know that these are native plants. They're not just some random weeds that blew in, and show that you care. Mulch the area. Be careful with native plants. They really don't want a lot of mulch, and make sure that you're not inhibiting them from coming up, and remove the litter. This is an example in my neighborhood, just up the street from a friend of mine. This property is owned by a woman. I don't know her. She just lives up the street from my friend, but I'm so taken with this lawn and what she's done with it. She has completely transformed her grass into this garden. And this is in the early spring. It's not at its best, but you can see the daffodils are poking up here. She has taken into account the topography. So she's built these beautiful little rock terraces. She's put in some trellising for some of the vegetables. Here's one that's protecting a little plant underneath, but she can also grow her peas and other things up these trellises. She does have some vegetables growing. She's got just a variety of things. She's got some trees, really a lovely idea. And she even put in some little fairy lights underneath. So at night, there's little lights underneath these rock walls. Use of pathways and terracing. This is my parents' backyard in Wisconsin, and this is my dog, Dudley Do-Right. He is lying on the path. My parents, many years ago, they had their entire backyard transformed into a garden to get rid of the grass. This is wild ginger, and this is the pathway. Now you can see these little white flowers growing here. This is just to caution you how easily and quickly invasives can come in. This is Star of Bethlehem, and it's really tenacious and difficult to get rid of, but we're pulling and working on it, and over the years I think we're going to get rid of it. But this is a cue of care to show that there's a pathway here, to show that there is some method in this beautiful little backyard garden. This is here in Arlington. It's not too far from me. As I was walking Dudley, we came across this, and this is a slope. So this probably used to be a grass lawn, and they have terraced it. This is probably about the same steepness as what I'm dealing with. And I love this idea. They've got some native phlox here that drips down really nicely over the surface. And they've got some annuals, some little pansies growing here. And then they've even got some whimsy up here with the flamingos. Again, the signage, use of rocks and mulch. This is at Wolf Trap. This was a project with master gardeners and some youth, changing a big space at Wolf Trap National Park into a native garden. And it was a really fun project. We did it in less than a day. And I think Colleen said that she had been by there and that they had showed this off during a native plant tour at Wolf Trap. This is another public garden, And yes, it helps to have staff. There's people that keep this up, but I thought this was a really clever idea. This 2 pieces of regular lawn, and then they've just taken a strip, maybe 4 to 6 feet wide, and put in this lovely little garden. And they have made sure they've got something flowering at different times of the year. And they've kept with a color scheme. There's pinks and purples in here. I just thought it was a really nice idea. Again, the clean edges to show that it's intentional and adding some beauty. These are some stock photos I found, again, showing how you want to use borders. And they've put in alyssum here. It's a very short little plant, and then built up to some taller plants in the back. Shows that there's some intention here. This is in DC. Again, you've got the walkway that's been kept clear, and then they've taken up the lawn and put in some evergreens and mulched it, even a crepe myrtle here for some height. So all ideas for turning your grass into a garden. Monitoring is the key. You need to do it at least once a week. Go out there and look for weeds. Look for volunteer. Oh, here's my cat. Look for cats. Look for litter, and make sure there's no encroachment on public space with plants that might be flopping over. And any other questions? I'm just gonna go.
Yes, we have quite a few questions. Can lasagna gardening result in garden too fertile for native plants?
Well, that's a great question. You're not ever, very few people are going to get 100% success with what you plant. Gardening is sort of like fishing. You know, fishing is called fishing, not catching. Well, gardening, you're always working, but plants are either going to be happy where they're at or they're not. And with my own garden, it's gone through so much conversion. I used to have butterfly weed that was growing down there, and there's no butterfly weed anymore. It got smothered out, or the fennel chased it off or something. But so was it because it was too fertile? I don't think so. I think it was something else. So I don't think that's an interesting question. I'm not sure how to exactly answer it, except to say that plants are going to be, they're either going to be happy with what you've given them or they're not. And a soil test might help you get the right answer. Maybe you don't have enough nutrition in there. Maybe it's too alkaline or too acidic, but I wouldn't blame that on lasagna gardening.
Okay, so you mentioned about visiting your garden at least once a week. How often do you need to water it? How drought resistant is lasagna gardening generally?
It's the same as any other type of garden. At the beginning, and when you first planted it, you know, of course, new seeds, new seedlings are always going to need water. I'll never forget a square foot garden I went to, and it was done at a local library. And the gardener went in and she was showing us how to plant the bean seeds. And then the class ended and she walked away and she never watered in those seeds. And it was like, oh, you need to water them. You just planted them. You need to water them. So when you first plant, yes, you need to water. And then after that, it's like any other garden. The plants are going to need water when they need water. So it's not, it's really just the same as any other garden bed.
Great. A question on whether you have suggestions to eradicate wisteria vines. The listener is saying they've cut them, but they're coming back, and would solarization finally kill it, in your opinion?
I am not familiar with that. It's worth a try. It's certainly worth a try, because black plastic, you can just get some trash bags and pin it down and see if that takes care of it. But I don't know. Actually, it's another thing I can look into.
And kind of the same question for English ivy. Do you have experience or suggestions on using solarization for English ivy?
Solarization is not going to get rid of English ivy. It might beat it down, but that, oh, it's so tenacious, and it sets in roots all along its length, wherever it's touching the ground. It really needs to be dug out and pulled. I am not a big proponent on using chemicals, and Master Naturalists are pulling English ivy out of Tuckahoe Woods, and every week they're out there. In the wintertime, I think it might just be once a month, but they're out there pulling it up. It's good. It's great to pull it up off the ground. If it's on trees, it's better to cut it from around the tree and let it die on the tree. Otherwise, if you pull it off the tree, you're going to take some bark with it, and that can damage the tree. So English ivy needs to be pulled, and you'll pull it, and then you pull it again, and over time, you're going to get it.
Great. So you mentioned the use of black plastic, and the listener has a question on whether black plastic would kill all the good fungi and other materials in the soil.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know exactly how much damage it can do, but yeah, you're killing a lot of things. That's why I think that this kinder, gentler method is better. In the case of Central Library, they determined they wanted to use solarization because they did not want to use chemicals, because they're growing vegetables there. So solarization, it's a tool in your tool bag, but it's not the first thing to go to, because yes, it is going to kill unknown things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Would you need to require, does sedge require thinning after a few years?
Does thatch?
Sedge.
Yes. I would think so. If it's happy, it is going to spread, and you start out with plugs of it, and then it'll start to fill in. But yeah, and the nice thing about native plants, when they're happy, they do tend to spread and multiply, and that's a perfect way. Just dig some up in the spring and share them with your neighbor, or donate them to a plant sale, or put them on a listserv or something, and encourage more people to have native plants. I dig up a lot of golden ragwort out of my yard and share it with neighbors. I think it's a great sort of intro plant for people that don't have a lot of experience with native plants. It can be aggressive and spread, so you want to put it in a place that's great for a hell strip, because it is pretty much evergreen, and it will send up early yellow flowers, a stalk of yellow flowers in the spring. And then you can just cut that off, and you'll have your pretty ground cover. Also, it grows well in baking sun, as I have on my hell strip. It also grows in really deep shade. It grows anywhere. It's great stuff.
Great. So can you let us know on how long should folks wait for the layers to break down or compress enough to be able to support new plants when you're doing lasagna gardening? And the comment is that simply layered and fresh does not seem to be enough to support the new plants.
It is. Again, it's going to depend on what you use, but if your end result is like black soil, leaf mulchy, plant right into it. I mean, I've done it. That's how I've created everything I showed you. I planted either same day or when I got around to it. Like you saw my hell strip when it was only partially planted, that's now fully planted. So you can plant directly into it. If the plants aren't happy, you might need to try again. Maybe you put in too many of those Starbucks coffee grounds or something, but give it a try.
Great. What care do native plants need in the winter? Should you leave them intact until early spring so insects can benefit? How much do you need to cut dead materials back in the spring?
Again, it's personal choice, and it's sort of what you want, but as far as what the insects need, I attended some talks by Sam Droege, who knows a lot about bees, our native bees. And he says that 10 inches of stalks that are kind of pithy, cut them down to 10 inches and then leave them there. If you've got something like coneflower, that can have a lot of interesting winter interest and look kind of pretty if you keep the seed heads and everything intact. Joe pie, again, it's going to be kind of a feathery look. It's sort of your own preference. My neighbors want me to trim it down, so I try to take it down to 10 inches, but I leave some of them taller. Another thing about the bees is they actually need the stem to be broken in order to get in there to lay their eggs and overwinter. So it's a good thing to break them off at 10 or 12 inches. Actually helps them.
Great. Will lasagna gardening work for sandy soils?
I don't have experience with that, but I don't know why not. I mean, if you're doing it on a beach, I don't know, but if it's just sandy soil, yeah, I think it's worth a shot. Sure.
Do you by chance have recommendations for the final level of the soil? What type would you recommend?
Well, here in Arlington, we get this free composted leaf mulch, and it's really broken down nicely. Sometimes you go to the mulch pile and it's actually steaming because it's breaking down so much. So that's a good one that I use here. Or sometimes for my final layer, I will take a mix. I'll take a big bucket or my wheelbarrow and I'll put in some composted manure, maybe some of the rabbit pellets that I got from my friend, some compost from my own backyard, and some used seed starting mix that I can crumble up and put in there, and then the leaf mulch, and sort of make a mix for that final layer.
Great, thank you. How would you go about having a white clover lawn instead of an all green grass lawn?
I would start overseeding. You can buy, there's some like micro clovers that I'm really intrigued by. I haven't looked into it, but I would think that you could try overseeding it and seeing how it takes. Clover's pretty tenacious. So I think that just even overseeding with some Dutch clover or whatever type of clover you want would work. Beware, there are clovers that get really tall. I mean, they're beautiful. The crimson clover is a great cover crop, and it can get really quite tall, 12 inches, 15 inches or more. So that kind of thing in a lawn, you would need to be mowing it.
And any recommendations on alternatives for a native lawn that can take foot traffic?
Good question. Sedges apparently are not as friendly for foot traffic, but things like violets are even a little stronger than sedge, believe it or not. I don't have that much experience. Like I say, I haven't gone with sedge for my side yard. I'm thinking about it. So I don't have personal experience, but just from what I read up, the sedges are not as friendly for constant foot traffic. Some of the times I've seen some patios where people put some of the little steppable thymes. Some of the garden stores sell things that are called steppables. And for a native, I know that I've seen golden star. It's Chrysogenum virginicum. I find that to be pretty tender. I have not had much success of that staying around. It's easily crowded out by other plants, but other people say it works great, and it's sold as a steppable. So
thank you. So we have a lot of interest in hearing about how you keep the deer and rabbits from eating your beautiful plants, especially on your health strip. Any ideas?
Well, I live on a pretty busy street, so I have seen rabbits up and down the sidewalk once in a while, but I also see fox up and down the sidewalk. Rabbits and critters like that, they're very cyclical. So you'll have a big rabbit population and no fox, and then suddenly you get lots of fox. Like during the pandemic, Every time I walk my dog, almost every time, we see a fox. And I live on Sycamore Street. So it's a, and I've got high school behind me. I've got an elementary school behind me. I mean, there's traffic and there's people. So the rabbits don't tend to stay around long enough to hurt my hell strip. And we don't, knock wood, have any deer on Sycamore Street yet. But the rabbits in my backyard, I use chicken wire, like my strawberry bed. I put little tunnels of chicken wire over, and that helped a lot.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on neighbors using lawn service, and how far into our yards should we worry about the pesticides affecting our plants?
That's a good question. I don't share any property line with my neighbors except that garage. So I know that what I do on my yard is pretty much in my yard. Now, the exception is my neighbors in the back. I know they have a lawn service, and I am a little bit concerned. I've got some pawpaw trees right along their fence, the fence, and I'm somewhat concerned. I have talked to them about, will you talk to your lawn service about maybe using more earth-friendly chemicals? And they're open to that kind of discussion. I don't know how far it goes with putting it into practice, but yeah, that's a continuing concern. And thankfully, I haven't noticed any of my neighbors using any of the mosquito companies. Those, boy, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but oh my goodness, those kill everything. They're not killing, oh, here's my cat again. They're not killing the mosquitoes at the right time of the life cycle. They're trying to kill the adults, but they're killing everything else. They're killing all the beneficials. They're killing all the native bees, anything that's in that yard at that time. And then what's going to happen, the next day, mosquitoes just fly right back in. So we really need to discourage that kind of thing. Education.
Great. Yes. And then I don't remember whether we covered this, but getting rid of crabgrass before doing lasagna gardening.
I have put lasagna gardening right over crabgrass. I mean, again, mow it really close, mow it down. If it's only a tuft or two, go ahead and dig it up before you do it. If it's solid crabgrass, give it a try. My main problem is Bermuda grass, and I have not seen that coming up through the garden, except that one situation where I told you about the Halloween little cemetery. Otherwise, with the garden, I've redone it, and now the Bermuda grass that I see is coming in from the edges. It's not coming up from underneath. So it's doing its job. The lasagna gardening is working.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that's all the questions.
Well, I'm just showing you the resources here. That's it for me.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you again. Thank you, Becky, Ista, and Colleen for great Q&A. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.